Good evening, everyone. Let us bow our hearts before the Lord as we ask His presence in this our autism workshop. Let us pray. Lord God, we thank you that you promise to be with us always. Thank you that your presence is with us right now. We choose to look to you as we begin this autism workshop. We ask that you would reveal your love to us anew. Lord, today we give you our friendships, our learning, our hopes, and our troubles, and ask that you help us to work together in love and forgiveness. Please speak your words of life into our beings. We pray that you would deepen our comprehension, broaden our thinking, and transform our understanding of what we are about to study. For you are our wise counselor, our perfect teacher, and our faithful friend. Today, this evening, we present our participants to you and ask that you bless them, those who are online and those to come. We thank you for the team from CASE, Caribbean Autism Support for Education, who will be presenting this evening, and we ask that you bless them. We thank you for the Mico CARE team working behind the scenes, and we ask your blessing upon us. Lord, we pray that at the end of this workshop, we will transform that which we have learned into action that will impact in a meaningful way our autistic community. And we will be careful to give you all the glory and the praise. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Mrs. McDonald, for that very uplifting prayer. We'll now hand over to our director for the official welcome. Dr. Anderson Morgan.
Thank you, Mrs. Minot Williams, our chairperson for this evening's seminar, and our very hardworking and meticulous manager of public relations, public education, and quality assurance. Ladies and gentlemen, parents, caregivers, and I'm sure we have some educators who have joined us, student teachers, colleagues all, good afternoon. It is my distinct pleasure on behalf of the Mico University College Child Assessment and Research in Education Center, Mico CARE, to welcome you wholeheartedly to our seminar this afternoon. This seminar is particularly geared at parents and caregivers. But of course, educators, you are most welcome because I know you also play this role in your various settings. So we want to welcome you all. The seminar is being hosted in collaboration, as you heard before, with the Caribbean Autism Support for Education Foundation, CASE. And we want to, even at this point, thank them for their partnership in hosting this very important event. I wish, therefore, to specially welcome our presenters, Mrs. Deborah Santiago, who is an autism coach and founder of CASE, Dr. Shannon Worton, Assistant Director, School-Related Psychological Assessment and Client Intervention at Nova Southeastern University, and Ms. Catalina Uribe, Clinical Support Administrator at NSU CARD, and CARD is the Center for Autism and Related Disabilities. This team, of course, will be formally introduced to you shortly. So welcome to you all who've taken your time out to be here this afternoon. Parents and caregivers, we welcome you wholeheartedly because this is for you. We welcome our teachers, our teacher educators, our student teachers, members of other support groups, stakeholders supporting children with autism and their families. This seminar, I believe, is timely for various reasons. One being the number of children with autism seems to be rising exponentially across the globe. The CDC has reported in 2021 that the prevalence rate is 1 in 44. And even though we do not yet have our own prevalence data in Jamaica, I believe our observations indicate that the trend is pretty similar. This seminar is also timely as a nation, we grapple with what we believe is the untimely death of Gabriel King, a 9-year-old with autism. But on a brighter note, this workshop is timely as we look forward to February 14, 2022, when Jamaica's Disability Act will be enforced. So it is on this note that I welcome you all to this seminar this afternoon. We hope that you will benefit immensely from the interactions that are shared here, and that what you learn today will make a difference in your ability to support a child with autism to achieve their full potential. Welcome, everyone. A wholehearted welcome to you all, and do have an enriching afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anderson Morgan, for that very warm and insightful welcome. We will now hand over to Ms. Westcar to do the introduction of our speakers. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Mrs. Mack. Ladies and gentlemen, parents, teachers, colleagues. It is with great pleasure that I introduce tonight's guest speakers. And I am so excited about the presentations because I know these individuals are bringing a wealth of knowledge and hands-on experience working with the autism spectrum community. And I am just feeling very blessed that they have chosen to partner with the Mico CARE Centre. Tonight's presenters are a team from CASE, the Caribbean Autism Support for Education Foundation. It is a non-profit organization with a mission to give back to the autism spectrum disorder community in Jamaica and the Caribbean by providing autism educational support to teachers and parents, partnering with psychological facilities and schools to increase awareness and acceptance and preparing students with autism to live fulfilling lives. We have 3 members of the team tonight, and I'm going to be introducing them in the order of their presentation. So listen carefully. Our first presenter is Dr. Shannon Worton. And Dr. Shannon Worton is a licensed psychologist and assistant director of the School-Related Psychological Assessment and Clinical Interventions Clinic, housed within the Novo Southeastern University Psychological Center, or Psychological Services Center in Fort Lauderdale. Dr. Worton's professional interests include training and education, promoting self-care, suicide prevention, social justice, and psychological assessment. Tonight, she will be doing an overview on autism and typical behaviors seen. Our second presenter for tonight will be Mrs. Deborah Santiago. Mrs. Santiago, who is originally from Kingston, Jamaica, is the founder and she is an autism coach in the Broward County Public School District in Florida. She also provides additional support teaching and to students and is in the self-contained special education class. Ms. Santiago works with students with autism in the inclusive setting of the school in all grade levels. She also works closely with families of her students while partnering with community support groups to educate teachers, educational assistants, and families on strategies and best practices for students with autism. So please make sure you have your questions ready to ask. Our third presenter is Ms. Uribe, is a doctoral student in Eastern University. She is also a clinical support at the University of Miami Nova Southeastern University Center for Autism and Related Disabilities. Her passion for work within the autism community began as a behavior technician, then special education teacher in a self-contained preschool. Catalina's goal is to provide affirming services and teach from a strength-based approach. Please, everyone, remove all forms of distraction. Ensure you have your pens and papers ready. Type your questions if you need to. We want to make sure that we are tapping into their knowledge tonight. And just join me in welcoming our presenters. Dr. Shannon Worton, Mrs. Deborah Santiago, and Miss Catalina Uribe. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we will jump into our webinar, and to start, we'll go over, provide a very brief overview of autism, defining what it is. I'm going to pass it over to Debbie after that to talk about early intervention. We'll get into some information about speech and language, and then we'll end our evening talking about how to manage temper tantrums, and then also some strategies for echolalia. So to briefly go over autism, I wanted to start with this term neurodiversity. In our start today, we heard the prevalence for autism was about 1 in 44. So autism is really common and is becoming increasingly more common. And if we pay particular focus on this second point right here, the concept that differences in brain functioning within the human population are normal, and that brain functioning that is not neurotypical should not be stigmatized, is particularly important. And why is that? When we approach working with kids who are on the spectrum or have a child who's on the spectrum, it's important to recognize that they relate to the world differently. And we believe it's helpful to take this strength-based approach. Yes, there are challenges, and we're going to discuss ways to kind of help them with these challenges, but really looking at those differences and the focus on neurodiversity, and that neurodiversity is normal within our population, helps us to reduce the stigma and helps us to reduce this deficit focus for kids with autism. And this quote, probably a lot of you have heard, but it's worth repeating. If you've met one individual with autism, you've met one individual with autism. I love to remind myself of this quote because every child is different, period. And then within the autism community, there's such variation in terms of type of characteristics, severity of characteristics, impairment. And so we're going to provide strategies and techniques that are helpful overall, but really important to look for your particular child or the individual children you're working with to decide what's going to be helpful for them. So that level of personalization is going to be really critical. So what is autism? We use a set criteria when we're trying to define what autism means, what it looks like, what characteristics are common for individuals on the spectrum, which is kind of paradoxical to what I just said, that everyone is different, but we do see common characteristics among individuals with autism. And those characteristics fall in these two domains. So one is deficits in social communication and social interaction, and then the other is restricted or repetitive interests, activities, behaviors. You can go back to the next one, Catalina. Thank you. So for that first piece, challenges with social communication, we see that individuals on the autism spectrum have difficulties with social emotional reciprocity. So what might that look like? You might feel like you have to engage in conversation or lead the conversation, or it's a one-sided conversation, or it might feel uncomfortable or awkward at times. And there is differences in nonverbal communication. So most notably, people often reference eye contact, and that individuals on the autism spectrum feel overwhelmed or uncomfortable looking people straight in the eye. But it can also look like having difficulties reading emotional expressions, facial expressions, nonverbal cues, so picking up on those social nuances. And then the last piece of the social communication and interaction criteria is developing, maintaining, and understanding relationships. And I think this is important to spend a moment on, because many people on the autism spectrum really want relationships and crave relationships and find fulfillment in relationships. So it's not that they're not interested. Some people are not interested, but Many are. It's that developing those relationships and understanding typical social relationships can be difficult for them, which is where some social skills work might come into place. And then the second piece, the repetitive, restricted interest behaviors, whatnot. This can present in lots of different ways. I'll start at the bottom and work our way up. One is sensory hyper or hyporeactivity, meaning the world, the environment, how it's perceived, sounds, sights, touches can be very overwhelming and experienced at a much higher level of intensity, or they seek out that type of stimulation. We often see restricted interest, so somebody who is really focused on one area, like the child who loves dinosaurs, but to a point where they're not able to talk about anything other than dinosaurs. And if you try to veer them off that conversation, it's very hard to get them to engage in a different topic. The next is some type of insistence on sameness or inflexible adherence to routines, ritualized patterns. So what does that look like? A kid who's really comfortable in their way of doing things. So every day at a certain time, things have to be done, or they have to dress a certain way or eat the same thing every day. And any variation or deviation from that routine is distressing and might trigger an emotional reaction. And then stereotyped repetitive movements or use of objects or speech, these type of stimming behaviors, you probably heard that term, can serve many functions for people on the autism spectrum. We often notice that individuals will say something over and over, or they'll engage in a certain motor movement, like a hand movement, over and over. You hear about hand flapping, and Catalina is going to talk about echolalia a little bit later too, because I know that was a common question, how to address these repetitive behaviors. So while those are the key characteristics in our diagnostic criteria, there's many other areas of functioning that are important to consider. And one is language. We know that about 40% of individuals on the autism spectrum are non-speaking, which also means 60% are speaking, though it's quite common to see some challenge with language. And I included some examples here, but just for time purpose, I'm going to skip past them. And we also see comorbid conditions, so other areas of concern that are commonly seen with autism. And I think this is important because it really begs for a team approach, and knowing that when we're working with an individual on the spectrum, we're not just addressing one particular characteristic, we're really looking at the whole person and what are their unique challenges and unique strengths, and how do we use those strengths to offset the challenges. We can go on to the next one, Catalina. So what causes autism? We're not 100% sure, but research points to a few risk factors. We know that there's a genetic component, changes in genes, changes that occur during fetal development, or genetic risk that's passed on from a parent. And there's also been identified environmental risk factors. So for example, increased parental age, pregnancy and birth complications. So for kids who are premature, who are low birth weight, so under 5.5 pounds or so, when there are multiple pregnancies, or when there's a short spacing of pregnancies, that's been identified as risk factors. But worth noting, there's no one cause for autism, and there's also no support that vaccines cause autism, which was a misconception, a misconception from years before. Okay, so I'm going to pass it off to Debbie and then come back later to talk about how to manage behavioral challenges.
Okay, good afternoon. Early intervention, I'm going to talk about early intervention. Early intervention is one of the things that everybody who knows me or anybody who I come in contact with in the autism world, I will tell them how much I love early intervention, because it is the giving the child a head start to all these therapies, all the practices, the evidence-based practices that we know will help our child in all the areas that they need help in. So I'm going to read the slides and then we're going to talk a little bit more about it. It is a system of services and supports designed to identify and meet the needs of a child in the 5 development areas of physical development, cognitive, communication, social, emotional, and adaptive development. And when you look at the early intervention program, such as the one we have in a preschool setting, these are the areas that you will see that we're constantly working with the children to develop these areas. The early intervention services are provided in a child's natural learning environment. So usually, if it's identified as early as a few months, the child's age being a few months old, it would be provided in the home. So in Florida, we have grants that are given by that work along with the Department of Education, where if a parent, say, goes to their pediatrician and they have a discussion on the milestones, what are is the child doing at 6 months, 8 months? If they see then between the parent and the pediatrician that the child is not meeting the milestones, then from that, as early as a few months old, the parent can get help. And there is places such as Child Find, which I would equivalent those areas as a Mico CARE, how Mico CARE would be able to help you, where in this particular case, parents can get help in the home setting. The children are screened by these professionals, by these qualified providers. They come into the home, they help with the parents with what you call play therapy, but really the therapy is to try and bridge the gap of the social emotional that might not be there yet or delayed, the communication that might be delayed. And at that point, when the child reaches about 2, 2.5, if the gap seems that they are still slowly not closing, then the child may get an evaluation. So very, very similar to the one that many of you receive for your children at Mico CARE. Child would be evaluated, and at that point they will get the eligibility of getting special services in the school for when they're 3 years old for early intervention within the school-based setting. So I'm going to go to the next slide. So what are the benefits of the early intervention? Well, it establishes developmental levels for a child. It determines the patterns of strengths and weaknesses, because all our children are going to have strengths. And when we look at the children's strengths and the weaknesses, the teachers together with initially with the psychologists, but once they get in the school, the teachers with the whole team, which includes myself and even the parents, will come together and create an individualized intervention plan for that child. So since we know, as Dr. Worton said, that if you know one child with autism, that's one child with autism, the plans that are written are going to be specific to the child. So although they're working within the early intervention classroom together with other children in a small group, probably a class of maybe 6 or 8 children, the plans that are written are going to be for the goals that that child needs. The therapies that the child is going to receive as early as 3 years old may include occupational therapy, and most likely will include language therapy, because one of the things we do know is that autism does affect the language of our children. And when we say language, as I go on to the slides later on, we're going to discuss in particular what language therapy looks like and what language and speech looks like. But one of the very most important benefits of early intervention, I would say, is that it helps the families, because it helps the family. Once you know that your child has autism, you can start planning. You can, it guides families to research, it guides them to select resources that they need, and you're able to help plan for the future of your child. And you also are able to learn skills that are going to help your child. So early intervention not only benefits the child, but it will benefit the whole family. So on the next slide, we'll see, for example, this is one of the classes in my school, which is a preschool classroom. So the children in this classroom are 3 or 4 years old. So they come in at 3 and they stay for 2 years within the class until, so they stay from 3 to 5 years of each. So they've been already identified, they've been evaluated, and they now qualify for this program. The teachers there are trained in autism, and they're trained, they're trained in special education, but in particular in autism with autism strategies. And the classroom is set up with what we call evidence-based strategies, which are strategies we are known to help children in those areas of the cognitive development, social emotional development, in communication, and independence. So if you look, I would just point to that first slide. The one at the top with, yes, would be like a little whole group center where the children may meet in the morning, where they greet each other, where the teacher goes over the calendars and maybe reads them a story, the days of the week, months of the year, what is it like outside? So it's a general meeting place for what we'll consider a whole group setting. Then there you have, like you can see, there's a computer area. So they have their technology area. At the top slide on the right, there is like a play area. So there in the play area, the children are moving to different centers throughout the day, but with each center, there is the learning that's going on there is contributing to the growth in all those areas that we discussed. You can look on the next slide. Again, it's just more of the different areas. That table represents where the teacher would meet with the child. If you look on the left side, you see like a picture, and then there are smaller pictures on it. Right, the children literally know that when they're going to see in the future slides, you're going to see that each child has an icon and they know where to go. They learn how to go. Of course, the first day or the first week is a teaching of how to maneuver the class and how to go from center to center, but they would go to there to work with their teacher. The other one where there's paint is an arts and crafts center. So there is multiple centers within the classroom where they're doing multiple different tasks. The next one, please. And this slide here, the one at the bottom there in the middle, then I would say the one in the middle is where each child has an icon, because of course the visuals are good for the children because it lets them know what to expect and lets them know where to go, because since there may be some children in that room who are nonverbal or have, and all of them who have language deficits, the visuals is a way that we use to teach.
May you take up tone and water for me, please? Yes.
If you're unmuted, can you please mute yourself?
Thank you. Thank you. So those visual schedules, it's how the children move to the various centers. You can go ahead. So that's just an example of a preschool classroom. So we move on to occupational therapy. What it is, occupational therapists help individuals develop, recover, or maintain their ability to engage in meaningful daily activities, including communication appropriately with others. So I would say that in an early intervention setting or from early intervention throughout the elementary, I'm going to speak to elementary, meaning the primary education. If there are therapies, the most common therapies that our children receive, in addition to the education that the teacher is given, is speech and language therapy from a speech and language pathologist and occupational therapy. I would say that more children qualify to receive the language therapy than the occupational therapy, because it's only going to be given if during the evaluation there was a need for that therapy. You can go on to the next slide and we're talking a little bit more about what occupational therapists evaluate the current developmental levels of an individual, aiming to improve their ability to self-regulate emotions and participate in social interactions. And OTs provide services from early intervention all the way up to adulthood. If a person with autism needs occupational therapy, it could be a lifelong thing that they may require. However, some children, in my experience, some children start off receiving occupational therapy, And as they grow and they develop and the gap closes for that need, they no longer require that therapy within the school. Parents do always have the option to continually get it outside if they feel it benefits the child, but there are many children who, once they have that therapy, and especially if they had it from the early intervention, you see that some of their gaps begin to close. If they couldn't hold the pencil correctly, the grasp, they eventually learn the right grasp. If they had difficulty zipping or cutting with therapy over a period of time, they sometimes then they learn it. So there are times that the children are dismissed or no longer need the occupational therapy within the school setting. Go ahead. So occupational therapy and autism spectrum disorder, common OT interventions for individuals on the spectrum, focusing on sensory integration, and I'm going to get into that in a little more detail, and sensory-based strategies, implementing emotional development and self-regulation strategies and programs, organizing peer groups, social participation and play activities, and improving self-care routines to help with daily activities such as bathing, feeding, and grooming. Now, obviously, that part would not be done in the school. That is something that occupational therapists may work with families outside of school and working on motor development. So many of these things that we can go back a little bit, Catalina. I'm going to talk a little bit about the sensory integration. So when we talk about the sensory integration, we talk about those children who have those sensitivities to their senses. So the sound, you know, the children that cover their ears, if they hear the vacuum cleaner or they hear a fire alarm, the sound is very, very sharp for them. So we work on ways to coping mechanisms for that. Some of our students may use headphones. If we know there's a loud noise, or if we're having a fire drill, there's something we might offer to them, or just teach them to cover their ears. And that's like probably one that's most common, but also even sensitivities to clothes and tags. And so the occupational therapist will help to work on strategies to help the children with those hypersensitive things that their body receives. Emotional development and self-regulation strategies are things like when a child who gets easily upset by something that might be what we may consider something that's very small. However, for a child, maybe breaking the pencil is like a big thing. So we work on, okay, is that a problem? Is not a big problem or a small problem? What can we do if so you're teaching them the skills to regulate themselves, because it doesn't come natural to them. So what would come naturally to a child may not come natural to our children with autism. What may seem to be something that's not a big deal would be a big deal to our child with autism. So the occupational therapists, along with the teachers and even the speech and language pathologists, we're kind of all on the same board, because many of these things that the OT does, like emotional regulation, peer groups, social participation, they may be specifically working on that, but that carries over in the classroom for the child with autism, and it carries over into their language therapy. So really, I would say that the team of the occupational therapist and the teacher, the coach, and the language therapist, and the families, because we do meet with the families, all work on that, even though it might be something that is under what you would consider occupational therapy. So again, some more things that the occupational therapists will work on is using the cognitive behavioral approaches to support positive behavior. That would be for the child who might be always kind of down, very sad about, so just to build them up with a positive thought. I'm stupid. No, you're not. What if you do that? That's a mistake. What can we do? So teaching them, supporting them with positive behaviors. Visual support such as schedules, timers, video modeling. Well, all the classes for students with autism, like in a special like cluster or center type program like we have, tend to be set up like that, because we have learned through evidence that visual supports are best for our children to learn. The technology recommended in education and work activities, They give strategies to support personal responsibility and self-advocacy. So be able to speak up for yourself, talk up for yourself. You know, if another child is bothering you, not just take it, but how to self-advocate. No, I don't want to do that. No, I don't want to play that. All these things are done with the occupational therapist as well as the full team. And for an occupational therapist, supporting an adolescent's transitioning to adulthood and work readiness, occupational therapists will also work with that. So that's why I say with some children who, as they grow and they go into high school and then to going into college or going into getting a job or some work, occupational therapists will help with those transitions as well. So then we're going to move on to what is speech. And I know that a lot of times when people say speech, they are referring to language, because parents will say, well, my child needs speech. My child needs speech because they're not talking. So there's a little difference. So we're going to go over the difference between speech and language. So speech is how we actually say the sounds and use the words. So this will include the articulation, the voice, the fluency, the sound of the voice, how we breathe and make vocal folds to make sounds. If is your voice high pitch, is it low pitch? That's all speech. Articulation, how the movement of the mouth and how the words come out, and fluency, the flow. Or if someone stutters, that would be a fluency issue. That's speech. We'll go on to what language is. And language is where you will see most children with autism do have some kind of a language deficit. Language pertains to specific words and how we use them for our basic wants and needs. Language entails what words mean, how we use words, what we should say in different situations and scenarios. So receptive language, we can go back for just a little bit.
I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened.
Go back one slide.
Oh my gosh, my thingy is going out of control.
That's
One second.
All right, no worries.
Uh-oh. Let me reshare the screen. I'm very sorry about that.
All right. So while you're doing that, let me talk about receptive language anyway. Receptive language, there it is. Receptive language is what the child understands the parent to be saying. So for example, if you tell your child, go and get your school shoes, bring me your school shoes, and they're not able to do that, that means their receptive language could be deficient. Or if you give them any kind of request or command that you're telling them to do something, but they're not able to do it, and maybe they're 4 years old, so they can maybe look at you, their understanding of what you're saying is not linking together. That is receptive language. That's the disorder, receptive language. Expressive language, of course, is using words to express thoughts and ideas. So if a child is nonverbal, you would say, okay, they don't have their own expressive language, but they do have other ways to communicate. Or if a child is even verbal, but they find it hard to tell you what they want. They find it hard to tell you, I'm hungry and I'd like something to eat. They might just say eat, or they may just mumble just maybe a few words, but they're not able to put 3 or 4 utterances together to make a sentence. That is the expressive language that they're having a disorder. So a child can have a receptive language disorder, they can have an expressive language disorder, but they can also have both. So we're going to talk about how to develop language. So let me get to my notes so I don't forget anything in this part, because I know this is a part that is, I don't want to. So simplify language you use. So when you say simplify language, because our children are, languages are deficient, when you use sentences that are overly long, there might be a lot of, they're not getting all of it. So you might say, go upstairs and tidy your room and pick up your things and blah, 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 and you're giving a whole lot of list of things to do. And maybe they're stopped at the first sentence, to go upstairs or go in your room and get you this and da 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 da. But the only thing they heard was go in your room. So the first right there, the language, you have to simplify. Within the same thing, even for teachers, when teachers would say, I want you to do this and do that, da, 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 da. We teach with simplified language. So if you're giving them a direction, you said, let's get your pencil, we're writing. Pick up the pencil, we're gonna write. I mean, simplify the language so that they can understand what is being said. Another thing is imitating the sounds and behavior your child makes. So let's say a child is nonverbal but has some sounds. You don't want to say, well, it doesn't make sense because I can't even understand. If they pick up a ball and they go book, book, and showing you book, they're telling you they want the ball. So then you're going to imitate the sounds. You go book, ball, book, ball. So you're trying to develop that language. And and you're giving them that attention, giving them that joint attention, ball, so that they're realizing that you are connecting with them, you see what they're trying to say, because think of how frustrating it is when they know what they want to say, but they can't get it out. So you have to kind of meet them halfway. So if you see them saying ball, you're going to say ball. Do you want to throw the ball? Shall we play with the ball? You're going to imitate those sounds. You're going to and behavior your child is making to show that connection. Working on nonverbal communication means you're going to kind of over-exaggerate your actions. So nonverbal means you're using your body. So let's say you want to say throw. You're going to say, do you want to throw the ball? So you're going to, while you're saying it, you are showing the action, you're over-exaggerating it so that they're making more of a connection. If they pick up a toy and point to it, don't just, you're not going to ignore them. You're going to say, what is that toy? Is that your Lego? Let me see your Lego. And you're using the language of the thing and you're playing, you're trying to interact. So if you're doing that at home, if the child is in a place, a center or a school, a preschool setting that they're doing it, it will be, a road might be long, but it's a road that will get them somewhere. So try to listen and give an opportunity for the child to respond. So if they say, you want to play with the ball? And if they go like this or nod, you're going to nod too. Yes, yes. So you're developing that communication also. Not yes, shake your head no. You're using all those body language and gestures to help with the language development. Talk and read to your child. So talking to the child, even if the children are nonverbal, please don't think they're not understanding you, because they do. I can tell you that I have quite a few nonverbal students in my school, and I have big conversations. When I say big conversations, not like long-winded, but I talk to them every day. Hi, how are you? New shoes? I like them. I talk to them every day. And the more I talk to them, and I get to know, I start from 3, 4, 5, I've seen the growth, I promise you. I see them reacting to me. I see them trusting me. I see them nodding. I see that you understand what I'm saying. You do. And so you will see that it takes time, but you will see that growth in them. You'll see that even though the voice itself isn't there, that the communication is there, that they're understanding. Talking and reading to your child, I would definitely start with simple books, simple picture books, pointing to the pictures on the book while you're reading, pointing to the words. We're talking about 3-word, 4-word books. The boy has a car, or Bill has a car. Where's Bill? Is that Bill? You're showing them the book. Is that Bill? Touch Bill. That's Bill. Where's his car? Is that a car? Show me the car. And even sometimes, if they're not reacting first, maybe you take their hand and you're touching, your hand over hand. That's a car. That's Bill. And then even with your holding their hand, Bill has a car. So you're reading the sentence with them. So they're hearing you. They're seeing the word. It's only 4 words on the book, the sentence. So if you read that same book, which is nothing wrong with reading the same book every day for a week, there is some connections that are going to be going on. And you might find the second or third or fourth day when you're saying, show me the car, touch the car. Maybe the first day they didn't touch it, maybe the second day they didn't touch it, but maybe the third day they can at least touch the car. And I mean, the things we celebrate in our program is unbelievable. Because like a thing where a child couldn't touch a car, but we see 4 days later they're touching the car. It's like, I'm breaking out a party. It's like, what, did you see that? She touched the car, it's a high five, it's a hug. That's the way we roll. I mean, and it's, those are the things that bring us joy, to see little milestones made. So okay, let me stop right there, because I know I get excited about this. All right, and go on. All right, then those are the simpler things that I gave you that we can all do at home. Then we have alternative and augmentative communication, AAC. And you have some that are on unaided AAC, which is using the body language, maybe using, for some children, using sign language, teaching them, like I have students who will tell me they want more, or they'll show me that they want to drink using sign language. Or then you have aided augment AAC, which is material. So using, actually right here, let me show you that I wear this. This is my lanyard. And every day I have this, I wear this around my neck every day, because especially with preschool, when I'm talking to them, all right, okay, we're at lunch, you need to sit, and immediately it's almost magical. I'm saying it, but I'm showing them, and they're sitting. So this is like a visual that is also a communication system. Or you need to, just show you one more, maybe line up. You can see that. Okay, we're going to line up, and just by showing that, it makes that connection. So the AAC, which is alternative and augmentative communication system, the aided ones includes visuals like that, communication boards, which are just boards that have different pictures for the or books. It could be a communication book that could be very simple, that has pictures where a child could say, I want juice, maybe show you, pick a picture of the juice to show you that they want juice. I need to use a bathroom, show a picture of the toilet. So you teach them how to use the books to help them with their communication. And then POD is a more extensive, for a child would be who may be nonverbal at a very higher level, where it's more extensive, it's thematic, it's in like for school, for playground, for home, where they have like, I want to, and it's more sentences. So using a more extensive picture symbol to express themselves. But they also have things like voice output devices, where the children, looks like an iPad really, but they can touch it. And it's programmed by a speech and language pathologist with different sentences. So they can request, I am thirsty, I am hungry, whatever it is, they learn to use it, and it's their voice. Now, a lot of parents might think, well, I don't want my child to use that, because then they'll never speak. But the way we work with it is that the speech and language pathologist still works on language, still works on the voice to come out. However, they also have another tool that helps them. So it's like an aided tool along with the language development. And I think, let's see what else. All right, so that's it. And handing it over to Ms. Uribe for Echolalia.
Yes. So Dr. Worton mentioned this in the beginning, that we would explore a little bit more about echolalia, because that was a common, I'm so sorry, a common question that was received. So echolalia is the repetition of speech, and it can be immediate echolalia. So for example, if I say hello and somebody repeats hello right away, or it can be delayed. So maybe you listen to a line in a movie or a song on a Monday, and then on Wednesday you're repeating it, right? So it can be a little bit tricky, because sometimes these behaviors might seem like something that should be changed. But if you listen to my introduction in the beginning, the way that I like to, teach about autism and learn really is from a strength-based approach. So this would mean seeing the child's strengths and trying to use those strengths to help boost their weaknesses. So the thing about echolalia is that it might just serve as a direct message or communication. It might not just be something that we think is useless or meaningless. It might actually be their way of communicating something. Whether a child comes to your home and says, everybody sit at the table, it might be out of context to you because you've never heard them say that, or you've never said that yourself, but maybe at school, that's what the teacher says in order to prepare the students for snack. So maybe that's the child's way of signaling to you that they're ready for a snack, they're ready to eat. And so that's what they're trying to communicate with you. It might be tricky sometimes to figure out what the echolalia means. So 2 ways that we can work on this is, 1, to follow our child's lead. So research has shown that children who use echolalia benefit when adults follow their lead, because a lot of the time adults are directing the interaction, and it's usually with a lot of questions or a lot of commands. So echolalic children, they tend to repeat what adults say right away without understanding what they're echoing. It's also interesting because when I was a preschool teacher, sometimes it feels silly, but you really should model using I statements, because if I modeled, for example, to a little girl and I said, Catalina, great job washing your hands, she may now repeat to me, Catalina, great job washing your hands, and is speaking in the 3rd person. So sometimes when we are trying to expand that language and we're trying to provide more examples and introduce more language into their repertoire, that's one of the useful strategies. So we do want to follow their lead because, again, children tend to send messages that show more understanding. So by observing our child and by observing their interests, we might notice what it is that he's doing with different objects, where he's looking, and that can be useful information in determining what the echolalia is. So again, if a child was standing at the refrigerator and they said that phrase of, everybody sit at the table, that might point to you that, hey, I think my child is hungry, because they know that there's food in the refrigerator. And so they're telling me that they would like to eat something. We also need to pay attention to their mood. So do they seem happy? Are they frustrated? Are they upset or excited? Because sometimes kids with autism don't have the language to express themselves, even if they do have the verbal ability to, then we need to be their interpreters. So we need to realize, okay, is this something, a statement that they're communicating to me for joy, for pleasure, for interaction? Are they frustrated by something? So by noticing all of the little things, we can again determine what they're trying to tell us. So we have to listen carefully to what they're saying and make sure that we're interpreting for them. Until then, they're able to learn how to interpret for themselves. The other thing that is very common in children with autism is repetitive behaviors. And so some of these can be self-stimulatory, while others may be routine-based. Self-stimulatory behaviors may be like myself, I shake my leg up and down. I don't know why I do it. It's just something that's self-soothing to myself. Maybe you twirl your hair. Maybe you bite on a pencil. So sometimes kids with autism, they do things that are not necessarily what other people do. They may flap their hands, they may rock back and forth, they may turn in circles. And so again, this is one of those behaviors and one of those traits that, though it may not seem something that we typically see in the real world, it shouldn't be something that we necessarily have to target as change, right? For routine-based behaviors, Dr. Worton spoke a little bit about the rigidity that kids with autism and adults with autism may have. And a lot of this is due to their inability to self-regulate as efficiently as maybe others can. So for example, if you are able to stick to a routine every day, if you have a certain order of doing things, that will help ease some anxious feelings, and it will help you prepare for that setting. So when something suddenly changes and it's no longer in the routine, that may lead to a meltdown because the child doesn't know what to expect anymore. They're now, instead of focusing on maybe regulating their emotions because they know what to expect, Now they have to shift again and try to figure out what's going on in their environment instead of trying to focus inward, if that makes sense. So some reasons for the repetitive behaviors are because they just feel good and satisfying. They may calm anxiety. It can help generate or maintain body awareness. It can also help people focus on their concentration. And of course, it's a way to just reel ourselves in and deal with overwhelming sensations and emotions. So a lot of the time you might see these stimming behaviors as something that occurs when a child is overly excited, or maybe when they're getting upset. When a feeling is very, very big, that's when you might see these most. And you can also tell when something is self-stimulatory because it'll usually happen whether anybody else is there or not. And that brings me to managing challenging behaviors. So I just quickly want to go over 4 functions of behavior. And in behavior analytic terms, we kind of say that everybody eats. So E is for escape, A for attention, T is tangible, and S is sensory. So essentially, when anybody does any behavior, it can be boiled down into one of these 4 things. It can be escape from a person, from a task, from an environment. It can be attention, which is both positive and negative. And one of the things about attention is that it's not just verbal attention. Sometimes a behavior can be maintained just because you turned and looked at a person, right? So this is one of the challenges that I saw a lot in my classroom, especially with my teacher aides, when, you know, I would try to tell them not to engage with an attention-seeking behavior. And they're like, but I didn't say anything to him. I just looked at him. And I said, well, that's attention. And so that's feeding into that. The other one is tangible. So this is to get access to a specific item or an activity. This is when a child is maybe climbing on bookshelves because they want a specific book or a toy. And then the final one is sensory. And again, this one is a little bit harder sometimes to identify because it's something that's very internal. But usually what this type of behavior results in is something that happens whether someone's in the room or not, right? So for example, if a child is rocking back and forth, if you leave the room and they stop rocking, maybe we start thinking that it could be an attention-based behavior. But if you leave the room and they remain rocking, then it's more likely that it's something that's either self-soothing or satisfying to them in some way. So in thinking about these 4 basic functions of behavior, now Dr. Worton will talk a little bit about temper tantrums and some of the strategies we can use to prevent and react to them.
Thank you, Catalina. So to start us off, I put this quote. It's from an Instagram handle that I love, and I think it's so helpful. It's focused on the toddler age, but I find it applicable for children of lots of different age ranges. And they say, just like us, children have bad days, days when they're tired, not feeling well, lose their temper, or are emotional for no reason. This doesn't make them bad, this just makes them human. And when we think about temper tantrums, usually the first association is bad. It's something we want to get rid of, something we want to address. And yes, we want to address it. What I would like to do is think about it as information and really asking yourself why this child is reacting the way they're reacting, what's driving that behavior, what's the function underneath it, which is what Catalina just spoke to us about as well. Thank you. So to talk about preventing temper tantrums, this comes from the National Association of School Psychologists, and there's, so many techniques we could talk about. And so I tried to just kind of scrape the surface and pick a few that are worth trying to see if they work for your particular child or within your particular classroom. And we've heard a lot about routines. And so it makes sense that schedules and routines help to prevent tantrums. It can be kind of paradoxical again, because then any break in the schedule or routine can trigger an emotional reaction. But typically kids feel safe and secure, and they know what to expect when they have a set schedule and routine. And making that visible is also very helpful, particularly for the reason Debbie shared earlier. When we pair our vocalizations with something visual, it really reinforces that association and learning. And during times of transition, embedding some type of activity or engagement so that it doesn't create a space for behaviors to come out. So for example, if you're going from a preferred activity, playing outside, to a non-preferred activity, maybe it's time to come in and complete something for school or to take a bath, that's not appealing to a little kid. They don't want to go from preferred to not preferred. So building in a transition, maybe they come inside and they color for 5 minutes. That's helpful because it gets them closer to the end goal. Come inside. It's more tolerable going from playing to drawing. And again, it makes everyone happy. And engaging and stimulating throughout the day. So tantrums are energy. And so as much as we can take that energy and channel it into productive, engaging, stimulating outlets, it can help reduce those tantrums. So exercising during the day, not underestimating the use of play, just having that unstructured time, kids are able to learn and explore and engage in things that are of interest to them, help stimulate their body, thereby reducing temper tantrums. And coping skills as well. We're going to come back to that one and look at a few specific. Providing choices is a great technique because kids and humans in general feel more comfortable when they're in control. And choices doesn't mean they get to do exactly what they want to do, but it means you provide them with options that you are comfortable with. So maybe eating is challenging for them, and so you provide 2 choices of what they can eat on this day. Or maybe they have homework to do and they have to get it done, but again, you provide them a choice of what to start with. Scheduling time to connect is another way to prevent tantrum. As Catalina mentioned, often behaviors are a mechanism to get that connection. And I think that's a helpful way to think about it. So when I think about attention seeking, I often think connection seeking. Our kids are telling us, I need something from you. And again, it often has a negative association, but it's really important to listen to that information they're sharing through their behaviors. And sometimes it tells us they just need to connect, spending 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes with them each day, doing something that they want, that's chosen by them, or just talking about things that are interesting to them if they're engaging in conversation can be really meaningful. And then picking and choosing battles. I think this is particularly important for temper tantrums because it is overwhelming to manage behaviors. And as much as we like to be superhumans and do everything, we cannot. Our energy is finite and limited too. And so even if you look at this upcoming week or this upcoming weekend, picking one thing to target or one behavior to address or one new skill to learn rather than having to fix or address everything all in one. Praise and rewards are another great technique to use to reinforce behavior and to decrease temper tantrums. And a good rule of thumb is we want 3 reinforcers or praises, positive feedback to every one criticism or like perceived negative feedback. And so we want to make sure we're doing a good job of reinforcing and rewarding way more than we are redirecting. And one aspect of that is figuring out what's the best reinforcer for your particular child. It's going to look totally different. Lots of kids are reinforced just by our verbal praise, not only saying good job, but labeling why we're saying that. What specifically did they do? Some kids are reinforced by tangibles, and it could be something as small as a sticker or drawing a star on the board for them. Some kids are reinforced by quality time, so spending an extra 5 minutes reading their favorite book at the end, but experimenting and identifying what's reinforcing for them. We talked about these, and I wanted to particularly mention too, using praise more than rewards, because that's a concern of a lot of parents. We can't always be rewarding our kids with something tangible, and it is helpful to know that praise goes a long way. And again, that connection, being seen, being heard by an adult is really reinforcing for kids. Making sure it's immediate. So if little one does something positive, letting them know right in the moment rather than delayed reinforcement, that tends to go a long way. And setting appropriate and realistic goals. So we heard earlier about reinforcing and praising and throwing that party for even small steps in the direction you are looking for. Go to the next one, Catalina. So I'll spend just a few minutes so that we do have time for questions at the end. Because behaviors are information for us and they communicate something, one of the helpful ways to address a temper tantrum is to teach kids how to label their feelings. And I love this quote by Glennon Doyle Melton. She says, "Feeling all your feelings is hard, but that's what they're there for. Feelings are for feeling, all of them, even the hard ones." And that's really reinforcing this idea that even when our kids are having big emotions, which for us are usually very stressful, it's important that we lean into it and we help them learn how to cope with it rather than running away or reacting in a maybe less helpful way. And so there's many exercises we could do to teach kids about feelings and help them learn how to label them, reading books and looking for feeling words, pointing them out, looking at faces in books and saying, oh, that person looks surprised. Why are they surprised? Doing the same thing in movies, TV shows. When we're experiencing emotions and big feelings, labeling it, mommy's feeling frustrated, mommy had a hard day at work. Using drawings, so you can pick an emotion for the day, let's say sad, and draw what does it look like when we're sad? Where in our bodies do we feel sad? And if you even Google just labeling feeling worksheets, there's so many online. The idea is we want to make emotion words part of the language we use. And we also know that many kids on the spectrum are non-speaking, and so providing those visuals of emotions, you can go on to the next one too, Catalina, providing visuals can give them a way to communicate what they're feeling without using spoken words. And so you might, for example, have something like this in your home or in your classroom where you're teaching them different facial expressions connected to different emotions. So if they're in the middle of a temper tantrum, you can ask them to point to the face that represents how they're feeling, and just that way to communicate and feel heard again will help kind of de-escalate, because the worst feeling is when we don't feel understood by others around us, right? And so this gives them a tool to let us know what they're experiencing. Another thing that is helpful, relaxation, grounding techniques. I won't go into all the specifics, but there's so many child-friendly ways to teach deep breathing. So for example, one on the previous slide, you don't have to move again, Catalina, but one on the previous slide, having the belly breathing with a stuffed animal or a toy creates that visual. Again, multiple sources of feedback. So teaching them to lay on their back, put that stuffed animal on their chest, and as they take deep breaths in and out, they see that stuffed animal move up and down. Or like the bumblebee breathing. When you're breathing and you're making sounds and you're sounding like a bumblebee, it's just more engaging for a kid. Similarly, on the next slide, and again, if you Google, the technical term is progressive muscle relaxation. There are child-friendly scripts that you can practice in the classroom, you can practice at home, just teaching them how to relax their body, how to take all the stress and tension they might be experiencing and de-escalate it. And all of these things are helpful to do on a regular basis. We've spoken a lot about the routines and consistency, and this is no different. So we don't want to use relaxation only when we need it. It's a skill. We want to practice it as much as we can, ideally on a daily basis, but that's probably not realistic for most of us, but at least frequently enough that we become familiar, we know how to do it. So then when we really need it, when our kid's in the middle of a temper tantrum, we can turn to that and they already have become good at making their body relax. And another way I like to do this is in their environment, having a chill out zone or a calm down spot, something that's not a punishment. So a lot of kids, if you say like, go calm down in your room, that feels negative to them. They feel like they're being punished, they feel isolated. This is something different. It's a place all in their own that they can practice their calming activities. It could be reading, it could be snuggling with a stuffed animal, as you see here, coloring, it could have the feeling faces. Again, the idea is this is a normal part of their routine. We do it as adults. We need time to decompress at the end of a difficult day. And again, kids are no different, and having a space they can turn to can be helpful. So in the moment, again, the feeling is okay, the behavior might not be okay, it might be not preferred. So we want to validate feelings and help them channel. So when they're having these big emotions, getting on their level, which could literally look like kneeling down and making sure we're at eye contact with them. If eye contact is not extremely uncomfortable for them, again, keep that in mind. We're modeling calmness. That's a huge way kids learn. We're labeling feelings, even either by having them label, or we can say, it seems like you're frustrated, it seems like you're overwhelmed, and then encourage a use of one of those coping. Let's take a deep breath together. Let's read for 5 minutes together. Let's go on a walk. Less helpful things to do, giving in, negotiating or over-explaining, getting angry. We want to make sure we're getting at the root of what's going on, which will subsequently help decrease future temper tantrums. I put this here too, one, to remind myself to talk about timeout in general, and two, to talk about parent timeouts. So this quote on the right, as adults, it would be incredibly hurtful to be ignored or worse, sent away during times of distress, makes me think about timeout. And I'm not saying that timeout is bad or not to use timeout, but what I am saying is it's helpful to consider when it's helpful and when it's less helpful. Because when our kids are having really big feelings, a lot of times it makes it worse when they're sent away or they don't have us, the adult, there to help them regulate or cope with those emotions. And so if those tantrums are them experiencing a lot of emotional distress and needing to learn how to calm down, a lot of times timeout is not going to be helpful. What can be helpful is that we take our personal timeouts, because again, we're human and we experience all the emotions our kids experience. And so if we need to take a parent timeout, speaking calmly to them, saying mommy's going to go in her room for 5 minutes, setting a time limit, sends them the message that I'm not going away for forever. This is time limited. I'm going to come back and address this, to walk away. And then for us to engage in something calming too. It sounds kind of silly to say, but again, it's a parallel process. If we do it, it's much more likely our kids will do it too. I put a couple of slides on tantrums related to sensory needs. This comes right from Autism Speak, so I won't go into it because I want to save the last 10 minutes for questions. The message I want to give is sometimes tantrums are a reaction to hypersensitivity or hyposensitivity. And this is where picking and choosing battles can come into place too. So for example, if it's too loud in a room for a child, sure, we might help them learn how to cope with that, but it might be just as helpful, if not better, to give them an accommodation, to give them headphones, to block out the noise, to give them earplugs, to reduce that hypersensitivity. And this is importantly, especially important when we're talking about kids on the spectrum, because there is that biological, physiological component. We know that they experience sensory input more intensely often than neurotypical individuals do. And so we don't want to punish or get mad when they're experiencing something that really is beyond their control. So check out autismspeaks.org because they have a lot of suggestions for how to manage sensory related needs and tantrums that might come out because of it. So I will pause to allow us to transition to any questions, thoughts that you all have.
And I will say that I did try to address some of the questions in the comments, but of course it's a very superficial answer considering that I've never seen your children, met them, know anything about them. So take it all with a grain of salt, just throwing out ideas there. I also will say that there were a few parents talking about trying to get speech therapy or language therapy and being on a very long wait list. Though it's not the same thing, I would definitely suggest you trying to look for language therapy resources online. So different strategies that you can implement as a parent in your everyday life. For example, one of the best things to do is really just talking to your child and reading to your child, like we mentioned. You may not realize it, but sometimes after a full day of work, you may be tired of talking. However, if you can incorporate these strategies within your routine, so for example, if you're cooking dinner and you talk through all of the steps, I'm getting 1 cup of rice, I'm putting it in the pot, now I'm taking the spoon, I'm mixing. You know, by doing that and talking out loud, you're inputting language into your child's brain. And, you know, like Ms. Santiago said, whether it's something that they take in immediately or something that takes a little bit more time, it's still you offering them that support.
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Shalika Matthews. I'm the clinical manager at Mico CARE Centre, and we just want to open up the last couple of minutes to questions. I have some written down, and I did see Ms. Uribe answering some definitely in the comments. So one of the first questions that came up was to please expand on the genetic risk factor regarding autism.
So the etiology or the cause of autism is something that's still being widely studied. And so there's no particular gene that's been identified that causes autism. And that's true for essentially any condition that we talk about, but likely multiple genes and changes in genes that interact together to contribute to characteristics of autism. So it's probably something that we wonder most about, but still searching for answers through research.
Okay, great. Miss Kay Lambert, you can go ahead.
Hello, good night. One of the issues, well, I have several issues as it relates to the management of children with autism or on the spectrum. My son is currently 11 years old. He was diagnosed at 18 months. But we had a warm time in the beginning because, one, the treatment here in Jamaica is very expensive. And two, they tend to use as far as I'm concerned, it's like a programming where they have we call it a cookbook. And even though he did not fit into the standard mold in terms of how he behaved, and notice that they kept him at that level, even though he was not at that level. So the things that they identify, like the sensory issue, he didn't have any sensory issue, but yet they were giving him treatment or therapy for that. There was some confusion with ABA versus VBA. So the first behavioral therapist used the ABA model. And then when we switched to another one, the VBA, I'm just wondering, so with all of that rambling, I'm just wondering that for children who are mild, I don't want to use mild, but mild, what is the treatment modality for children who are not as severe as the others? Because he talks, well, he goes to what we call a regular school. We don't have much issues with him at all. But yet he's on the spectrum. And as I said, they're trying to use the therapy for children who are severe, and they're trying to use it for him. And we found out that it was actually holding him back. And since we have stopped therapy and we're actually doing what we are doing with him, he has excelled so well. So why they use like a cookbook to deal with every child on the spectrum?
And I think you remember, the parent is the first advocate, which is you, and you know your child best. And as has been mentioned in this this seminar, that every child with autism, it is a spectrum. And so you have what you call mild, which is the same as how we refer to high functioning children with autism. So that is those children who can go to can be in a regular classroom, can be learning with maybe a class of 15, 20 neurotypical, as they call it, peers. However, he may just need a few adjustments. If it's maybe he needs more work in comprehension, like tutoring, or maybe you can find the area that is needed and just work with that area. So, for example, I told you that in my school I have children in a special program, who have more of a what you would say the cookbook, or more of a routine classroom atmosphere. However, there are many children who are in the regular classroom that I might go up and I just give the teacher strategies for behaviors, like strategies that where he doesn't like to transition from his preferred top subject, which might be reading, to go to math. He tends to have his physical meltdown then. So then I'll give her strategies like, okay, give him a choice of what he wants to do first. And we just work with strategies. So your point being that once you know your child, if he's able to be in a regular classroom and a regular thing, that's where you want him to be. And if you're seeing success with him now, then you've made the right call. And so it is possible that he could have been held back if he was in a setting that was not really giving him what he needs. So I don't know if that makes sense, but because it is a spectrum, some children will need those ABA, which is applied behavior analysis. Some children do benefit from that, but then others don't need that. They just need some strategies to help support them. All right. To add to that, Catalina or Shannon?
Well, I know that Janice and Marissa have their hands raised, so I'll let them ask their questions first.
All right, Janice, you can go ahead.
All right. Good evening, everybody. All right, I'm going to agree. Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Okay, I am going to agree with what was said earlier as it pertains to the kids, because I have a son who's 3. He was diagnosed at 2, but I kind of figured he was autistic from about 10 months old, because I noticed there were a lot of delays. There are still delays. However, persons kept saying, talk to him, keep talking to him. And just like others, we've been trying to get, speech therapists. It's very difficult in Jamaica. But what I did, just like you suggested, get resources online, which I started to do that from he was about 1 year old, and I tried using it with him. Also working in a routine, trying to talk with him. He didn't say anything until he was about 2 years old. But even before that, I kept buying charts and putting charts everywhere in the house. So my house was like a school. So we kept talking to him. We're in the kitchen. We're like, what's this? This is a carrot. This is a pepper. That sort of thing. And when he was 2 years old, he just started saying them. He still doesn't have very good communicative language, neither receptive nor expressive. But he's at the point where he can tell you his name, he can tell you where he lives, he can tell you what he wants. He's in an inclusive school. My issue with him at the moment is he doesn't eat any solid food. Nothing whatsoever. He refused to take it, and I do not know what to do. And he started therapy, occupational therapy, but I'm not seeing where it is really helping him. I think they're more focusing on him speaking than actually eating, and that's really what I want to work on. He wasn't potty trained when he just started, and they did like 1 session with him the Saturday, and by the Thursday he was using the potty by himself. So he's very quick with visual aids and that sort of thing, but for whatever reason he just refuses to eat, and I really, really need help with this. And I've been attending so many of these seminars, but I really just can't get any help with him eating anything.
And the occupational therapists are the ones who are usually the ones that are the best to help you with that whole thing with the mouth and the feelings, kind of the sensitivities to different foods, or in your son's case to solids. The medical doctor, the occupational therapist, Dr. Worton, those are the ones that I would have referred you to the occupational therapist, because that is where they come in. However, it's only one occupational therapist you've tried?
Yes, only one that I've tried. I'm actually in St. James, and there's only one place in St. James that actually does therapy. So I was on a list for a while. I just got in. So yeah.
There are even occupational therapists that specialize in the eating, eating this, like Echolalia.
That's what I heard.
Yeah.
That's what I heard, and I've been trying to see if I can get any access at all. But that's right now where he is, because I said he's in an inclusive school. And from where he was at school, he's 3-year-old now, and he was in the 3-year-old class. And in December, I was called by the principal telling me that they're moving him to the 4-year-old class because he's so far advanced academically. But I'm just still not there with the eating and getting him to express himself more. But we're working on the expressive language, but the eating, just no progress there.
I would just say to maybe do some online research too, again, because on occupational therapy specific to foods, to see if you can get some tips, some ideas online for that, because I know that is a very special area.
One of my favorite websites for that, the Association for Speech and Language Pathologists, ASHA, ASHA. They have a lot of information. It's kind of dense, but it's also helpful because they explain potential causes, different treatments. As was mentioned, that's a specialty area, eating and feeding among little ones. And so I would continue to advocate, continue to share with the occupational therapist that that's something that you want to focus on and what you're most concerned about. And then check out ASHA as well, because they do have some good ideas on there too.
Okay, I will. Thank you.
Marissa,
you can go ahead.
Okay, good night, everyone. Thank you very much for the presentation. It was extremely informative. I was just actually wondering if you could go back to a slide, but I noticed a lot of persons are asking if the presentation can be emailed. So if it's going to be emailed, then that's fine. But if not, there was a slide on, I lost my page, 1 second. A slide on praise and rewards that began with identifying the best reinforcers. I just wanted to go back to that slide, and I would just take a quick snippet so that I can make my notes. Okay, that's all. But thank you very much for the tips. Very, very useful. My daughter is 2.5 years old, and right now I'm focusing on trying to get her to speak. She's just saying 1 or 2 words, but I now know which areas to work on, and I'll do that. So thank you very much.
And Mico CARE, they have the slides, so I know they have your information, so I'm sure they can get it out.
Yeah, definitely. We do have the slide, as well as the video will be on our YouTube page for reference to go through the presentation again.
Thank you.
All right, so Kay, you can go ahead again.
Right. It's relating to the person who came after me. I understand what she's going through, because the same person who is in Montego Bay, I dealt with the person in Kingston. And the issue is that it's the same thing I was saying, they have a cookbook. So they utilize that. So they don't normally gear the treatment based on what you are complaining for or of. They give the therapy based on what they think the child should be doing. And I find that it's very disheartening to you as a parent when you're trying to express yourself to these therapists, and they're making you feel as if your information, what you have to say doesn't count. They're following this, and this is what they're following. And as she said, it's very, very hard, because I live in St. Anne, and I have to travel from St. Anne all the way to Kingston on a Friday. Luckily, I was able to get speech therapist and a behavioral therapist on the same day. But then he was missing school every week. And then after a while, we started asking, can we come every other week? And then they're saying it's going to affect him. We said, we're sure it's not going to affect him. When we asked the behavioral therapist if she could give us some things to do at home, she just shoving a shadow down on us. And we keep saying, why do we need a shadow? We don't need a shadow. There's a father and there's a mother. We can do it. And she just kept saying shadow, 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 shadow. So that's one of the biggest issues we have here in Jamaica. Like, people don't take us serious. They're in for the money and they're focused on the money. Finish.
That is a particularly horrible experience. It really should be more individualized, and very much parents' perspective should be taken into account, because as therapists, we're not there most of the time, so we don't see what happens most of the time. So definitely keep doing what you're doing in terms of advocating, because you're doing a great job. And if you see that something's really not working, just because it's a therapist in your area doesn't mean you should continue to use them. Email other therapists in other parishes to see if they have different ideas that you can get access to. Especially know that we've opened up more to online therapy. Maybe they can consult with you via this platform to see if you see if you can get access to other things, because if you don't need a shadow, you don't need to have a shadow. And
right,
it's not necessary at all.
I want one class, one fit off. No.
That's why I like this forum too, because I think it's a place that creates a sense of community. And although it might not be able to change the frustrations that are happening, I do think it's helpful just to be able to put words to it and feel like you're not alone in those frustrations, and also gather to make those small changes in the community over time. So I like hearing people's experience. I wish it wasn't happening that way, but I think it's helpful to connect to others who might be going through something similar.
Yep.
Tarek, you can go ahead.
Hi, good evening, everyone. First, I'd just like to thank the organizers for putting together this forum. I found it to be quite helpful. I have 4-year-old twin boys. One of them is on the spectrum. He was diagnosed at 2. And a lot of the challenges that have been represented tonight, I have personally been dealing with, from very early. I knew there was something going on with him. What I would like to ask about tonight is has to do with his some of his stimming behaviors. Now, some of his stimming behaviors, are just that, they're self-soothing, but there are some that are a little worrying because they are borderline self-harming. So when he was really young, he used to headbang at about 8 months, from 8 months to about maybe like 18 months. He would bang his head against the wall, he would bang his head against the floor. And just when I was about to get a helmet, he stopped the head banging. Now he's 4, and about maybe 8 months, maybe a year ago, he started this thing now where he will hit himself in the face. So it's like he's taking his fist and he's hitting himself in the face when he wants to get attention, when he wants you to lift him up, or when he wants you to get him something to drink. And because he's not expressive, he is verbal but not expressive. So he has some words, he has some nursery rhymes, he has some things that he will repeat, but he struggles to clearly express what it is that he wants, whether it's that he's tired or whether it's, so you're constantly having to run through the gamut of possibilities to determine what exactly it is that he needs. And he'll just start hitting himself until you figure it out, basically. And it's just really, as you can imagine, concerning, because he's harming himself, and then you giving him the attention because you want him to stop harming himself,
right,
makes it a more effective strategy for him to use, because he knows you're going to give him the attention once he starts hitting himself in the face. And it's really, really difficult because you want to ignore the tantrum behavior and you want to ignore the attention-seeking behavior, but you don't want him to hurt himself. And he's hit himself to the point where he left a bruise once. And it's just really difficult. So any thoughts, tips, ideas would be greatly appreciated.
What comes to mind, if he's trying to get your attention for his needs, and if you by now have, and you can chime in, Dr. Worton, if you have figured out what his needs are, like if is he hitting every time he's hungry, every time he wants the computer, if you have figured out when he does it, like observe when he.
That's the thing. He does it for so many different reasons that you have to figure it out each time. So it's not that he's doing it for a specific thing, so that you know, okay, he's doing it because he wants to eat. No, it could be that he wants to eat, it could be that he wants to sleep, it could be that it's too loud, it could be that it's too dark, it could be that he needs an iPad, it could be so many things. And so that's what the frustration, that's what makes it difficult.
I was thinking in the terms of like some kind of this is where like you have a communication book and teaching him how to get the. Well, I mean, what were you thinking? Like I was thinking for my students, when I observe them, I said, okay, I know they want this. I teach them how to. System or some kind of a communication tool. Catalina, what do you think?
I was thinking the same thing. Self-injurious behaviors are the most difficult because when it is attention-based, of course, you're going to go help them in that moment. But I would also work on teaching visuals and providing a different way to communicate what it is they want. So, you know, teaching them that this picture of the light switch means lights off or lights on, right? It might be a process, but it seems that over time, they've realized that this is the best way to get what they need, you know? And so now we need to reverse that and we need to teach them a replacement skill so that they're able to get to the same end goal without, you know, the self-injurious behavior. And one of the things, and it really depends on what the behavior is, because again, if it's very severe, you don't want to not help the child, but are there ways that you can protect him without giving the attention? So maybe having a padded room or, you know, having mittens, something like that, that way you can ignore it and not give the attention without risking the hurt too much. But certainly I would stick to, you know, trying to teach some visuals and an alternative mode of communication.
Yes, I did visuals. And even if you start with a few and he gets the idea that, oh, when I do this, I get what I want. When I give daddy this, and I'd say I want food, I'm getting it. Or when I said a light, he's giving me, like you have to kind of respond to it. You have to teach them by responding to it. So he will then learn that when I do this, I'm going to get what I want and I don't have to go to that extreme. You know what I'm saying? So even if it starts off with 5 things that you know that he might have done in the past, and you teach him how to use a visual to tell you that's what you want, and then you follow up with it, it might after you keep doing it, he will get the idea that, okay, this is the way to go. And then you may have to just add to the visual library of what his needs are.
Thank you for the suggestions.
Portia, you can go ahead. Portia, if you're speaking, we're not hearing you. All right. So I think that's it for questions. Does anyone else have any final questions before we just wrap up? All right, Melonia, you can go ahead.
Sorry. Hello, I'm Michelle Morris. Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Yes, I had a question. I typed it, but I think it was missed. You mentioned reading to assist the nonverbal child to communicate better. I've been trying that for so long, but the problem is getting my hyperactive child to sit down and actually even spend a few seconds with me to actually listen to me read to him. I can't get him to focus any at all. He's, by the time I pick up the book, he's out the room, he's in another room, he's downstairs. So it's really frustrating. And if I'm reading from a distance, I'm certain he's not hearing me. So how do I get him to even spend 5 minutes or less each day with me?
It is the comorbidity when they have the hyperactivity, because I have students who are like that too. And all I can say is that I start the teachers will start very small, like really just, you're gonna sit with me, just sit, come, we're holding and hold it. Like honestly, literally, sometimes we hold them, and we're pointing to the words. But it is hard when a child is hyperactive because they're running around the place, and depending on the extremity of it, it is difficult. But because we're in the classroom setting and we have our visuals and we know it's reading time, we kind of, our classrooms are set up with furniture where sometimes we don't have them penned in, but we have the furniture blocking to say, oh no, it's time to read. And we'll sit with them and kind of like hand over hand him to read. But I know at home it's a little different because he's home. But I would say develop that little time that you have, maybe develop a routine at home. Like when you come home, you have your nap, you're gonna read and show him on the visual. You're gonna, and when I say visual, you say, where do I get this visual from? You can Google Images, visuals, or you can take pictures of a book, take pictures of things and make visuals with it, like print it out and make it. And say, this is what we're gonna do now. And you're sitting and you may have to hold him a first few times and try and find an interest that he likes. So if you know of any interest, if he likes trains, try and find a book on trains. If it's dinosaurs, try and find a book on dinosaurs. So try to find something that he'll be interested in anyway that you're going to do the reading. You know what I'm saying? Just look for his interest and try and do it that way. But it might be that you have to kind of hold him and just kind of do it maybe 1 minute. And then the next time you do it, next few times, it might be 3 minutes and kind of build up.
Great. Melonia, you can go ahead.
Thanks. Good night. The Mico CARE unit, I'm new. Well, it's a new institution to me. What kind of support exactly do you offer to the community?
Okay. With regards to autism, the center typically offers assessment services. We don't have any clinicians on staff right now to offer therapeutic services. So it would just be assessment. And we start at age 5, not younger. So developmental assessments would have to be done by outside agencies. We can, if you email us, and I'll drop the email in the chat, we can provide a listing of agencies who do developmental assessments that parents of younger children can seek support from. Kay Murphy.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I basically got some answers through the other participants' questions. But one thing with my son, he's 7, and he told me he has a speech problem, but he said to me that no teacher, I can't teach him. He doesn't listen to me. He says that I'm not his teacher and he wants to go to school. So, but I just listened to the answer to the question just now. So I do try to find what he's interested in, but however, he's more interested in outdoors. He goes outside and look for planes passing in the sky, animals and stuff like that.
That's the book you want to get, planes. You say he looks at planes? Is that you said, Mark?
Yes, he loves planes.
And that's the book. Those are the books on planes. Anything with planes.
And animals. He likes animals.
Yes, that's it. That's where you start.
Yeah, but he's slightly hard hearing in his right ear. It was blocked. So the doctor explained that he's speaking based on how he's hearing.
Right.
So I tried to speak to him from the other ear that is okay, but most times I don't understand what he's saying, because he doesn't speak a full sentence, just probably every other word or one word and then do signs.
So observe him though. I mean, he's not speaking, but when he's doing the things, because I will tell you, my job is, I would say sometimes I just go in and because I support the teachers, and I will just study the children. I just observe them.
Yes.
And by just looking on them, I get to know that, oh my gosh, this little boy really loves crayons. This, I had another student, oh boy, this boy loves to El Dorado. He loves the furniture thing. He was always going on the furniture store. So I made things to motivate him based on with the El Dorado.
His interest.
Exactly. And that's I said, you're looking for El Dorado? Yes.
Okay.
It can be whatever is their interest is what is going to motivate them.
Right, because the thing about him is that before the pandemic, when he was in school, he would do whatever teacher tells him. But since the pandemic and he's home, he told me, I'm not teacher. And he will never listen to me.
Oh boy.
Because he says I'm not teacher and he needs to go to teacher.
Yes, I know. So in that case, so you're still at home now in school, so they haven't gone back, is what I'm hearing?
No, he hasn't gone back. We are actually waiting for a call from the Mico Centre in St. Anne's Bay.
Yeah. And then, in that case, sometime I would say, schools are closed. There are things called social stories that we write for a student. I don't know if you ever heard them, or social narratives, which explains to them. And it can be simple. I know you like to go to school and see your teacher. Right now, schools are closed, and you draw a picture of the school with a circle around with a thing. So mom is the teacher till the school opens. And I would those are the way we teach some of our kids to understand socially what's happening. And then I say, you understand the school is closed. So until school is open, mom is teacher. So, mommy is teacher. So that kind of gets into the brain. Okay, until the school is open, I have to learn here. And it may take you reading it for a few days before he gets it. But that is another.
Actually, I'm sorry to interject, but actually we drove by the school and showed him
exactly
that it's closed and they're no, but he's kind of like a programmed person.
Yes.
There are some things that we cannot get him out of that routine, no matter how hard we try. If we try, he throws a tantrum.
Right. They want to hear it. A lot of things that we do sometimes though are repetitive, that we have to. It takes a long time to get
until it gets in.
Yeah, and so you have to kind of just be calmly consistent.
Consistent, okay. Sometimes it's frustrating, but we have to do what we have to do.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
All right. Good night, everyone. I can just only take one or two more questions. We do have to log off at 7:30. So Miss Lewis, you can go ahead. And then Ryan and Carrie-Ann will be the last question after that. Or Miss Lewis, sorry.
Good night, everyone. Very, very informative session. Really, really enjoying it. Okay, so I have a lot of
We asked the police about the investigation into the killing.
7 years old now.
God.
I would like to find out if there are some tips that could be given when she's actually having a meltdown and she's actually throwing things all over the place that can harm her or actually damage stuff in the home. I'm just wondering, what is it that I'm supposed to do then? Do I hold her down? What is it?
Well, I went to talk from a school perspective, since that's where I will see. When I have a student who is throwing a tantrum, I also always try to remain calm. So I always approach very calmly. If it's a thing where it's danger, you don't have other kids. I would have to clear the room and have the children move to another room in a case like that. If it's something that you see that she does often, you might want to have, first of all, the space not too cluttered. You may have to kind of, take out some of the things that are dangerous. But sometimes when they are in the middle of the tantrum, as long as they're not getting hurt, I kind of will step back and I kind of will try to go in very calm and approach the situation very calm to see if I can calm them. Again, behavior usually is a form of communication. There's a function, so there's something that she's trying to tell you. So if you can see at the end what it is, once the tantrum is done and you can maybe talk to her. I don't remember if you said if she was verbal or nonverbal. Is she nonverbal? Or she's verbal? I don't remember.
She's verbal. She's verbal, yes.
Once
Yes.
she calms down and she's able to, and she can't tell you when she's in that motion. Don't bother to say to her, what's going on? Why tell you what? Because then when she's in that mode, she's not going to respond to you anyway. So you have to wait till she kind of de-escalate and then ask her, what is it that you want? And then when she tells you, at that point, she's a child that would need that breathing strategy, that when you're upset, you have to teach her how to self-regulate if she's a child that gets into frustration a lot. But of course, you can't do it while she's in the middle of the tantrum. But at time when she's calm, you teach her that. But also that is a child that you have to try and teach her, again, maybe with visuals. Because sometimes even when you're verbal, if you get upset, you lose your sense of processing. But you might have to teach her how to get the what she wants across without the tantrum. But in the midst of the tantrum, I would say stay away, make sure everybody is safe. Once she's calm, then you go through talking to her. Again, this could be another child who might need a social narrative about, and that's a whole nother autism lesson about learning to express yourself and what you need. But do you know what is her tantrums usually about?
It can be just about anything, because let's say she wants to use her sister's cell phone.
Right.
And yes, and she might just want to just drop it on the floor as well. So her sister not going to allow her to take her expensive cell phone. So when you try to take it from her, then she's refusing to give it up. And then if she continues to refuse and we try to get it, then she just start going to that mode.
Right.
Sometimes.
So this is where we're talking about giving them choices. And again, none of these strategies can be done when they're in the tantrum. But when you see that they like certain things, you might say, look, these are your choices here. If you want something, tell me what you want, say it to me or show me what you want and I'll get you it. If I can't get you that, what is it? What else do you want? And you might give her more than one choice. There's so many different strategies, but again, you have to, it is the kind of thing where you have to observe the child and see what it is. So you can say, oh, I see what is going on. But I would leave with the fact that if she's in a mood, I would always be calm, wait for her to calm down and then try to understand what she's requesting.
Okay. All right. Thanks so much.
All right. I'm so sorry. I see the hands up, but we're going to have to stop it right here. So I just want to do a quick thank you to all of our participants. On behalf of the Mico CARE Centre, we want to very much extend a hearty thank you to Ms. Santiago, Dr. Worton, and Ms. Uribe for taking the time to share their expertise with us tonight, and it was well received.